Oh, hello everyone. My name is VESA PELTOKORPI. I'm working for Senda campus for Hiroshima University. My specialty or discipline is management. I'm specialized in organizational behavior and human resource management. Often the problem that I encountered when I was a student was the using theory in research. When I was a student, I really didn't consider theories to be that relevant and did not really embed my studies into theory. However, though, when we are talking about deductive research, this type of research is always embedded into a certain type of theories. And today I will talk about the importance of theory in management research, and I will provide you two examples where I have used one particular theory to discover two different types of things. Okay, so what is the theory and why it is so important? What the scholars have said for a long time, there is nothing as practical as theory. Basically, the theory is providing us lenses in a way to comply or to solve complex social issues. So it provides some sort of simplification of the social phenomena, which makes it easier for us to see and to look at the different type of relationships between constructs. So what is the importance? It kind of provides a similar framework for the researchers to discuss their findings. What it does, it basically enables researchers to provide a parsimonious research framework or the research model for their studies, which enables for them to present their findings and the relationships between the constructs in research in a logical, coherent way. The problem now, when we are not using theories, we get into the type problems that we throw into constructs, and we find some sort of significant relationships in our studies, but there is not a logical coherence among those constructs, which make it difficult to explain actually why these things do exist. The problem is often encountered by the students. The next, I will talk to you a little bit about the one particular domain where the theories has been applied to and developed. And this particular domain has a very long history, and this is the turnover behavior. So what I mean by turnover behavior, we have two different types of turnover behaviors: involuntary turnover and voluntary turnover. The involuntary turnover means when the companies are firing people. The voluntary turnover is when the people who are working for an organization decide to leave the organization for a certain particular reason. There can be various reasons why people leave. For example, in Japan, that is a certain type of problem that women are leaving the workforce when they get pregnant and when they get married. So we have the M-curve type of relationship with the female labor force participation. The other problem that is encountered not only in Japan but in many developed countries is the workplace harassment. that the people are harassing, abusing other people, and that's why the people are leaving organizations, they quit. So now when we look at the seminal theories here, the first one, well, the history of the turnover research is more than 100 years old. But when we look at the seminal theoretical frameworks here, we look at the 1958 Simon and March framework, where they were explaining that people tend to leave because there are certain type of push factors in organizations. The factors that I mentioned, they are unhappy with their jobs, they have very low job satisfaction and a low organizational attachment, and that's why they leave. And this sort of March and Simon framework has been slowly developed by the other scholars as well. And the research continues. The problem now is sometimes the theory and the reality are not perfectly aligned. And the problem now when you are thinking why people are leaving, we have the push factors, we have the pull factors, maybe the other organization is more attractive, they make more money in another organization, and that's why they are leaving the organization for better opportunities. So there can be countless things why people are leaving their organization. And the research here, what we see is that the meta-analysis are showing that actually the variance is only 3.6%. So the 90 plus more percentage of the variance has remained undiscovered. So there's a lot of room to create better theories and constructs to describe why the voluntary turnover happens. So now what has happened and the theory that I'm focusing here is kind of providing a flip side of the voluntary turnover behavior. So up to the 2001, the scholars were focusing why people leave and looking at the various push and pull factors. And what Michel and the colleagues, associates, said that why don't we kind of look at the mirror side and focus on why people stay rather than they leave. So the leaving the organization is related to some sort of negative aspects and the push factors. And these scholars were saying maybe there are certain type of factors that embed people into the organizations, make it very difficult for them to leave organizations. And that was a very interesting idea when I was a student, you know, thinking of this sort of factor. So what the job embeddedness in a nutshell is, we have two different types of job embeddedness factors. We have the on-the-job embeddedness factor and we have the off-the-job embeddedness factor. The on-the-job embeddedness factors are focusing why the people are embedded into the organizations. The off-the-job embeddedness factors are focusing why the people are embedded into certain communities. So when we are thinking these both things at the same time, yeah, I mean the certain type of people are embedded into Hiroshima region because their relatives or friends are living here, they were brought up here, they like the weather, they know the place, and they don't want to leave. But let's start first from the job embeddedness factors. We have the three different types of the on-job embeddedness factors. The first ones are the links that when you are working, you have nice colleagues, you have a nice boss, you have a nice networks in the organization, you feel happy to work there, and that basically ties or embeds you into the organization. Makes sense. The other one is the fit. So the people have a certain type of fit factors to the organization. They like to work for a bank, for a certain organization, maybe for ethical organizations increasingly these days. Maybe their skills are fitting to that organization or their values. So there are certain type of fit factors that embed people into the organizations. The last one is a very interesting thing, is the sacrifice. When you are leaving the organization, you are making sacrifices. So basically leaving the organization and starting a new job is a risky business. And when we are thinking especially the Japanese organizations and the practices that they have, slowly the sacrifices are increasing and embedding people into the organizations. So for example, when we look at the traditional seniority-based promotion and the compensation practices, certainly it makes it more difficult for people to leave the organization, even though they may not be happy with their jobs. So now when we are moving into the off-the-job embeddedness factors, as I mentioned, you are living in Hiroshima, you have nice friends here, you have your relatives, you have your parents here, your kids are in school, and they have their friends and so forth. At a certain age, when you married, you have loan, the kids are having their friends, you are getting more embedded to the local community. Makes sense, right? The fifth one is, again, when we look at, for example, Japan, we have a wide range from Okinawa to Hokkaido and different type of weather and hobbies and so forth. And that's why some people from Okinawa don't want to move to Hokkaido and so forth. The last one is, again, the sacrifices. You may live in a beautiful place, in a safe place, and you don't want to leave that sort of community. Now, what the meta-analyses are showing, they are providing strong support for the theory, much more stronger support than the traditional turnover theories. In particular, in terms of the on-the-job embeddedness. So what we have seen slowly from the 2000 onwards in the last 20-odd years, less than 20 years, we have seen that people have started to focus more on the on-the-job embeddedness because it's explaining more variance in turnover behavior. So, in a nutshell, and to summarize, the job embeddedness theory, in a way, provides a very positive perspective. It provides benefits for the organizations. If they are embedding their employees more, the less likely they are to leave, and the companies can save money related to their replacing people and so forth. For the people themselves, employees, a good thing you have nice workmates and so forth, and you gain a certain type of resources. Now, let's move to the two studies. And I tell you one story that or a dilemma, let's say this. Some years back, I lived in Tokyo. And when I was traveling on the train, you know, to work and back, I saw people, men, who get bald. The getting bald means that normally that you get thin in the hair here. But in the train, I saw men who get bald here. And we can call this as spot baldness. And I was stricken by this. I was like, I've never seen anything like that in my life. And I asked my Japanese friends, and I said, what is going on? What's happening with these people? And my friends said that they are having extreme stress. This is a stress-related symptom that they might be harassed at the workplace, and there might be some negative things going on. And me as a stupid foreigner, I had a solution. Why don't they leave their job? And they said, no, it's not that easy. And I was thinking this for many years. letting the things sink down. And then I started to solve the problem, this sort of thing that I encountered through the theory, the job embeddedness theory. And I was starting to put the different things together. Now there is a certain type of harassment or negative things happening at the workplace, but at the same time, the people are reluctant to leave. And that sort of thing could be explained by the embeddedness type of thing. And then I was focusing, oh, well, that's easy to explain by the embeddedness theory. And then what about the negative consequences? So that was a dilemma. The embeddedness theory always talks about the positive things. But if we have extreme stress at the workplace, we see the people getting spot-balled, something is going on. And I wrote a paper with the two American professors, and we published this paper in 2016 in the Journal of Applied Psychology, kind of using the theory, but providing a different type of perspective. When the embeddedness is being stuck, you are stuck in the organization, you want to leave, but you're not able to leave. And the stuckness can be explained by the job embeddedness. So what we did here, we had two studies. The first study is related to the phenomena that I explained to you earlier, seeing the spot-balled men in the train. And then at the same time, I became interested in the power hara, or the power harassment that is quite common in Japan, and also in other countries. And there is not really much study on the power harassment, but there is another concept that is somewhat similar, and that is an abusive supervision. So when the supervisors are shouting at their subordinates, giving them silent treatments, don't give them important information, and so forth. That's a kind of a harassment type of thing. And basically, then this is the thing, when you are encountering that sort of harassment, what do? You are more inclined to leave the organization. That's a normal response type of thing. But when we are tying this together with the job embeddedness theory, well, actually, the people who are more embedded into their organization, they have sacrifices, and now it could be the seniority-based salary, something that they have gained over years, which makes it more difficult for them to leave. And we could explain this by the certain type of resources that they have gained over the years. So the more embedded the people are, the less likely they are to leave and to tolerate abusive supervision. So what we did, we created a hypothesis that basically when the people are abused and they are more embedded into the organization, they are less likely to leave the organization. So this is very much in line with the job embeddedness theory. Now, the angle here is that, and it comes with the spot boldness here, is the physical health. So when we look at the literature again, we see that people in this stress-driven environment being subject to abusive supervision tend to have stress-related symptoms, like getting spot-balled. And we say that, or we were thinking that now when the people are more embedded, they are staying in the organizations, but they are getting sick. And we started with these hypotheses, and we collected data from close to close to 600 people in Tokyo. And we waited. In this sort of research, you are collecting data, which is a kind of not a nice thing. First you collect data on whether they are abused or not, then you wait for 1 year to see whether they get sick or they leave the organization. So we had a multi-wave data collection. And what we did, we found exactly what we were expecting to find. We can see here is that the people who are lower in the embeddedness, they are more likely to leave if they are subject to abusive supervision. But at the same time, the more embedded people, they are less likely to leave, but they are suffering from the health-related symptoms. So that was a kind of very interesting finding. So now when we are looking at the applied psychology research, we often, or it would be good to replicate or do a certain type of replication in another context. So what happens in the United States? Are the people different in the United States from people in Japan? In principle, they are not. I mean, if they are subject to abusive supervision, they should experience a similar type of stress-related outcomes. And here we focused on two things. First, emotional exhaustion is basically when you are exhausted from the work and the stress you are having. And then with the sleep quantity and quality, the more you are experiencing abusive supervision, the less you are sleeping well. And again, the rationale here is the same. The more embedded you are, the less you are sleeping. The more embedded you are, the more abusive supervision, and the more embedded you are, you tend to have more emotional exhaustion. And we continued this with the job insecurity. Basically, you feel that maybe you will be fired, and we used a similar type of rationale here. When the people are experiencing more job insecurity and they are more embedded, we have the negative outcomes here. And what we found, when we collected again data using somewhat similar type of data collection methods, and we found support for two hypotheses that indeed the people who are more subject to abusive supervision and they are more embedded, they tend to experience more emotional exhaustion. And a similar thing, the sleep type of outcomes are there. So that was the study on the abusive supervision. Now there's another study that I'm working by myself, and I have just resubmitted the paper to an academic journal. And this is another thing that embeddedness is a very relevant theory, but not often used until recently, is the work-family conflict. And what do I mean by the work-family conflict here is basically when you are having a family and you are working, when you are working more, you have less time and the resources for the family, and that creates a conflict. That's the work-family conflict. And then if you are having more time, allocating more time for the family, you have less resources and time for the work, and that's the family-work type of conflict. So what the people who are having families and children are balancing between the work and the family-related factors. And now when we are looking at Japan in particular, and other developed countries as well, we can see the declining birth rates. And this is partly because the work, it's very difficult, especially for women, to work and to raise families at the same time. So I was kind of thinking, okay, let's see whether a similar type of rationale would apply here, that when the women are experiencing more work-family conflict, what would be the outcomes? And then I would be using again embeddedness as a moderator here. And here I'm focusing on the work-family conflict rather than the family-work conflict, using the rationale that most studies are showing the stronger and the more consistent results on the work-family conflict and the family-work conflicts on various outcomes. So now, when we are thinking of this, the more women are experiencing the work-family conflict, the more likely they are to leave the organization. So they are kind of seeking to alleviate the stress or the conflict by leaving the work domain. And this is what the research is showing us, that there is a direct positive effect between the work-family conflict and the turnover. But now, when we are looking this through the job embeddedness lenses, we can see that, well, actually, the women who are more embedded, again, to their organizations, and they are experiencing the work-family conflict, we tend to have negative outcomes and the consequences here. So in a way, the more embedded women, working mothers, are less likely to give up less likely to quit the organization, even though they are experiencing the work-family conflict, because they will gain, or they are feeling to get some sort of gains from the higher embeddedness. So what I did, I again started with a certain type of base hypothesis, saying that even though the women have the high work-family conflict, when they are more embedded, they are less likely to leave. And this is very much consistent with the job embeddedness theory. But now again here, I'm looking at the flip side. So again, if the women are more embedded to the work domain, what would be the negative outcomes? And the first one I was focusing here was again the emotional exhaustion. So when we think again, the more they are allocating resources to the work domain, in a way, by being more embedded, they have less resources to allocate to the family domain, and then they are starting to experience stress, or in this case, emotional exhaustion. And I was making the hypothesis again, the more the women experience in work-family conflict, when they are more embedded, they tend to experience a more emotional exhaustion. Now, what is a funky thing here in this study is focusing on the emotion-related outcomes. And personally, this is what I like about this study. The one is the guilt. And if you are thinking yourselves, if you have family and children, you are working overtime, you promised your children that you are playing with them in the evening, but there's a meeting at the work and you come back home at 9 o'clock or so, which is quite common, and you say to your children, I'm really sorry, but I had to work overtime. How do you feel? You feel guilty because you promised your children that you will spend time with them. So what the guiltiness is, it's a negative, inner-related emotional outcome, that I'm a bad parent or mother or father because I promised something that I was not able to do what I promised. So I used a similar type of rationale here, and this is a very, very novel type of a hypothesis, saying that when women are having the more work-family conflict and they are more embedded, they have less resources for the family domain and they tend to feel more guilty. The other one is again another negative emotion-related outcome, hostility. And what is the difference between the guiltiness and the hostility is that you feel guilty because you were not able to do something. I promised, but I was not able to do. Hostility is something that is directed to another, to something outside type of. So now the rationale here is that when you are having the work-family conflict and you are embedded, you are allocating more resources to the work domain, you feel frustrated because you have to work overtime and you are in this sort of situation. And you can say that, I don't like the organization, or you are shouting at your husband or wife. And often the hostility is a verbal hostility, having the stress-related attacks on people, sometimes without any particular reason. So you just feel frustrated because you are not able to do what you would like to do. And here again, the rational hypothesis is the same. The more work-family conflict, being more embedded, you are having more hostile reactions. Now, what I did this study also in Tokyo region, and why I did it there, partly because I lived there, and I had friends, and I was talking with my friends, with families on the problems they were having. And I was thinking that Tokyo would be a very nice place to conduct a study. And in this study, I basically collected data from highly educated working women with families, meaning that they have children, and they have a husband who is also working. So in a way, I conditioned or screened or made send the surveys to people who were most likely to experience a work-family conflict. And I started with more than 1,000 people. I ended up, again, I did this study over 14 months, I recall, again, to wait for them to quit their jobs and so forth. And I got the responses from 700 plus people, working mothers. And what did I find? Again, very much a similar type of pattern. So now we can see that actually the theory is providing a certain type of rationale to look at the different type of phenomena. So starting from here, we have the voluntary turnover, and we see that the women who are more embedded, we don't see much change whether they have high or work-family conflict. They will stay in the organization. But then what we see, that the women who are less embedded to the organization, they are more likely to solve the stress-related things by leaving the organization. Now the other one, when we look at the relationship with the emotional exhaustion, not really strong, but nevertheless we can see that the women who are more embedded tend to have a stronger emotional exhaustion outcomes than the women who are less embedded. Moving into the guilt, we can see a little bit more clear distinction and the differences between the women who are highly embedded or low embedded. So we can see again, this line here shows that the women who are experiencing the high work-family conflict tend to experience a higher type of guilt than the women who are less embedded to their organization. Lastly, the hostility is showing again the similar type of pattern that the women who are more embedded and who are experiencing the work-family conflict are experiencing more hostile outcomes or the reactions to the situation they are encountering. So in a nutshell, so what we learn, what are the contributions of these two different studies? The first, when we are starting now from the first slides I show you, the importance of theory. So both the phenomena I've experienced when I have been living in Tokyo, and I try to solve them. So what the theory is providing a very useful framework to look at the problem with the few constructs and to create, to show that there are clear differences of people who are more embedded, who are less embedded, and to show how they are related with various outcomes. So theory is useful and should be used in studies, or the studies should be embedded into theory. The other one, when we look at these two studies, they are very much in line with the embeddedness theory supporting it, that indeed we can see that the women or the people who are more embedded are less likely to leave their organization, even though they are facing a stressful, adverse situation at the workplace. The second thing, that how these two different studies are basically extending the theory, is that, as I mentioned earlier, the scholars up to this point were focusing mostly on the positive aspects of the embeddedness, that organizations will gain because employees are less likely to leave. The employees will gain because they have various resources at hand in organizations. So what in these studies we are showing, yes, that's true, but there are some negative consequences of high embeddedness in the organizations when people are exposed to abusive supervision in study 1 and then in study 2 to work-family conflict. So these two studies are using the theory, supporting it partly, and then partly extending by showing the so-called the dark side of the job embeddedness. So this sort of thing is using the theory to solve the complex social problem, and at the same time, when the study is done well, I don't know if these studies are done well, but you can judge it, it provides novel insights how the theory can be used to study various things. So this is the presentation for today. I thank you, and if you have any questions and comments and concerns, please feel free to ask me. Thank you. Enjoy this.